Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mike. Roll call, please, Yana.
Councilmember Johnson,
Here.
Councilmember Losi,
Here.
Councilmember Stanfield,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent,
Here.
Mayor Long.
Here. Thank you, Sienna. Our first item is a presentation and proclamations for a Great American Smokeout Proclamation. So, in recognition and support of the Great American Smokeout, November 18th, 2021. Whereas the American Cancer Society encourages all tobacco users to join the Great American Smokeout and quit tobacco for at least one day. And whereas each year, nearly 34,000 California adults die from smoking and 20,300 kids become new daily smokers. And whereas flavored tobacco products make smoking and vaping electronic cigarettes attractive to use and harder to quit. And whereas there are nearly 4 million adult smokers in California, but only 3.1% use electronic cigarettes. And whereas more than 84% of high school smokers use electronic cigarettes, almost all of which are flavored. And whereas electronic cigarettes create hazardous waste in the form of plastics, semiconductors, heavy metals, and lithium batteries for which there is no established disposal or recovery procedure. Whereas on Saturday, November 13th, there will be an Escape the Vape event on the Arcata Plaza between 10 and 1, where folks can safely dispose of electronic smoking devices and learn how to quit for good. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Fortuna recognizes and supports the American Cancer Society's Great American Smokeout on Thursday, November 18th, 2021, and encourages all residents who use tobacco products to consider that they do not have to stop smoking in one day. Just start with day one. Signed this first day of November 2021 at the City of Fortuna and State of California by Mayor Sue Long. And we have Jay McCubry here to accept this proclamation. Jay, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, I would. And I'm not sure if Jay Macedo is in the audience, but I would pass things on to him. First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor and council members for supporting this effort. The Great American Smokeout is a gentle reminder from your American Cancer Society that there are resources out there to help people quit. And now might be a more important time than ever because so many kids have started using candy flavored nicotine. So there's a great resource at novape.org. And you have tonight, I believe, Jay Macedo with Communities Against Nicotine. I'm with Tobacco Free North Coast. And Christy, you'll see on your screen raising her hand, is from the Tobacco Free Humboldt program. And we are all here to assist cities and counties who want to adopt policies to address and prevent nicotine addiction. We're at your service. Jay Macedo, are you on the line?
I didn't see him in the list of participants.
Okay, well, again, we'll just wrap it up. Visit Tobacco Free North Coast on the web. If you would like to learn more about our project, you can contact me through that website. And happy to help you guys protect your kids. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, and thank you for being here. Christy, did you want to say anything?
I would just add, I'm a person who lost 4 grandparents to tobacco. They were immigrants and migrants from the Great Dust Bowl era, and I lost all of them very early to smoking. And it really concerns me that our young people have access to the poisonous, addictive product these days. I'm hoping that we can stop it right here where it is. I want them to have long, happy lives with their grandchildren.
Thank you, Christy. All right, our next item is introduction of our new canine.
Thank you, Mayor Long and Honorable City Council. It is my extreme pleasure. I'm just extremely proud to be able to announce the fruition of our second canine team. That's going to be Canine Blitz, who is an 18-month-old Belgian Malinois, hand-selected and imported for the police department from Whitmer Tyson Imports. So that was the same importer that we got Kane from. And Blitz has been paired with 3-year Fortuna Police Department veteran Matt Moore, who is one of our field training officers. The two just completed their basic certifications, post certifications for apprehension and patrol on Thursday, Friday of last week. And Matt rushed back to make sure that Blitz got to make his first public appearance. We did that while the national Christmas tree was being displayed down at the River Lodge. And it was really amazing. The 2 canine units were pretty much spread out. The police department had a nice little table set up with pink patches and Fortuna Canine t-shirts, but all of the members of the community took the opportunity to meet both of the dogs and the handlers. And, you know, these 2 dogs are just incredibly social animals, which is one of the reasons that we picked them. They're all about business when they have to be business minded, but when it comes to, you know, bridging that gap of approachability with the police department, these canines certainly have established themselves early on. So I invited Officer Moore to join us tonight. I know we have a lot on the agenda, so Matt's just going to talk for about 2 or 3 minutes about the progress with his new partner Blitz and how apprehension school was. Matt, go ahead. And you're on mute.
Hello, thanks for having me. This is Canine Blitz. Can you see him in there? I think so. So this is Canine Blitz. We just got back from apprehension school, as the chief said. That was 4 weeks. We started the beginning of October. It was a long process. He's still a puppy. Obviously, he's still chewing on the leash. Leave it. He's still definitely a puppy, full of energy. But we made it down for the thing on Saturday for the sugar bear tree. That was the big break in the ice with him. And he did really well, meeting all the public. He loved all the kids. Leave it. Leave it. Send it. So he loved all the kids. He's very energetic. But he definitely came a long way from when I first got him. He was a handful for the first couple weeks. I had him 2 weeks prior to school for a bonding period, and he did really well with that. And now we're on patrol for our first night. We'll see how that goes. So it's pretty exciting. I'm excited to have him sitting. So yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to be here. We appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, stay safe.
Thank you. Have a good.
So, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just kind of to conclude everything, I want to say how appreciative we are here at the department to be able to have this extra resource. It really does mean the world to us. And we certainly have the community, our businesses, the council, Measure E, and other city staff to thank. And you know, it was a collaborative process, but we're just very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for pushing so hard and making it happen.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we're going to back up just a minute. I understand Jay Macedo has joined us. Would you like to say something, Jay, about the Great American Smokeout?
Yes. Oops, sorry, my camera's on here. Hi, how are you doing? Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Jay Macedo, and I am with the Health and Social Policy Institute's Tobacco Prevention Program, Communities Addressing Nicotine, CAN. I'm a former smoker myself, and I deal with the cost of smoking to this day. I had several of my closest family members pass too early because of smoking. And I just thank you and the council for taking the time to honor the Great American Smokeout. Our program CAN partners with Jay McCuppery and the Tobacco Free North Coast to provide support to communities seeking to prevent youth initiation of tobacco, lifetime of addiction, and to support folks that want to quit now. And we hope to partner with your community very soon. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, now we will move on to oral comments from the public. If anyone has anything they would like to speak to the council about that is not on the agenda, now would be the time. There should be a number on your screen so you can call in, or if you are on our Zoom meeting, you can raise your hand. I see no raised hands. Sienna is telling me no phone calls.
No.
So we'll close public comment and move on to our consent calendar. We have 7 items on our consent calendar consisting of city council minutes, report of disbursements, authorization of destruction of selected finance department files, designation of city agents to the California Office of Emergency Services, approval of a contract with RAO Construction for a minor concrete maintenance and repair project, a supplemental budget request for $25,000 to provide Headwaters grant match for mill site specific plan, and authorizing the city manager to implement teleconference public meetings for city council and all city committees, commissions, and boards pursuant to Assembly Bill 361. Does anyone wish to pull any of those items? I am seeing none, so how about a motion?
Make a
To approve
motion
the
to,
consent agenda.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you, guys. We have a motion and a second. Sienna,
Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Losi,
Yes,
Councilmember Stanfield,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
yes. All right, our first city council business is to receive an update on status of national opioid litigation and consider adopting resolution 2021-37, a resolution authorizing participation in settlement agreements arising from such litigation. Staff report, please.
I think I'm going to take that one. And so as the council is aware, several years ago, many state, local jurisdictions, hospitals, and other medical providers sued opioid manufacturers, distributors, and retailers. The state of the litigation is that some cases have gone to trial and many cases are in the process of being settled. Tonight, the council needs to consider whether it wants to participate in a settlement agreement that's been reached between the state and political subdivisions and the manufacturer Johnson & Johnson and 3 of the largest distributors of opioids. And as detailed in the staff report, the settlement is approximately $26 billion that'll be paid by these 4 companies over a period of 18 years. 70% of the funds will be available to counties and cities throughout the country for opioid abatement initiatives. And the city of Fortuna, if the council decides to participate, stands to receive upwards of $500,000 over the 18-year period, with a lot of those monies front-loaded in the first 5 to 9 years. And those funds can be used for opioid abatement, which is defined very broadly in the settlement documents. It includes things such as homelessness, addiction, and other general categories that I think the city can benefit from in terms of using these settlement proceeds. The final details of the settlement are still being worked out, and there are a couple milestones that still need to be achieved. One of those milestones is that what's called a critical mass of local jurisdictions sign on to participate in the settlement. And both Johnson & Johnson and the distributors have an out in which they can void the settlement agreements in the event that enough cities, counties, states do not participate in the settlement. That is not anticipated to occur. We do expect that the critical mass will be reached in terms of the settlement participation levels. But those milestones will be available to the distributors and Johnson & Johnson to back out of the agreement, likely in February of next year. And so the city, Fortuna, has until January 2nd, 2022 to decide whether it wants to opt in and participate in the settlement agreement. Staff recommends that the city council agree to participate, and the resolution that's before you tonight accomplishes that. If the council decides not to participate in the settlement, it of course first would not receive the opioid abatement funds, and it would retain the ability to bring suit against these manufacturers and the manufacturers and distributors in the future, which, considering the cost and this stage of the litigation, would not be recommended at this point. So I'm happy to address any questions. The resolution accomplishes a couple of things. One, it authorizes participation in the settlement and then appoints Merritt, the city manager, to take any and all necessary actions and sign any and all necessary documents with city attorney approval in order to participate and receive the funds. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Ryan. Let's open it for public comment. Council is talking. If you would like to comment on this item, please raise your hand if you are on our Zoom meeting, and if not, there should be a number so you can call in. Does council have any questions for Ryan? Mike Losi.
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Ryan, you mentioned the abatement, and under the settlement, the notice of settlement overview, it mentions settlements will be used to commence abatement of the crisis and provide relief to your citizens. And you mentioned homelessness and addiction. Can you provide us with what some of those actions would be that we would use this money for? I do understand that, or I hope that some of this money is used to pay back the city for the responses such as law enforcement in the past and maybe even in the future for these kinds of calls. But what actual action would you be thinking as far as with homelessness or addiction intervention, those kinds of things?
So the funds, the payment of the funds are intended to constitute the city's damages for opioid intervention in the past. But according to the terms of the settlement, the damages can only be spent on opioid prevention going forward. The actual list of what approved opioid abatement costs is still being negotiated, and we're waiting for the participation agreements that will spell that out. But in talking with some of the attorneys who are directly negotiating with the California AG's office on what those approved opioid abatement expenditures will be, it is supposed to be extremely broad. Such things as generally homelessness issues within the city, creating behavioral health benefits, education, substance abuse prevention, not just opioid intervention, but all substance abuse, restorative justice, harm reduction, crime prevention. It really should be broad enough, and we'll keep a close eye on it, but it really should be broad enough that I think the police department and the city will find good use for those funds. There will be reporting obligations on an annual basis that will have to report back how those funds were spent to make sure that they're being expended for approved uses, but all indications are that it's going to be very broad.
And some of those uses would include administrative costs to the city.
Correct.
Thank you.
Sure. And I would note the final amount, as I mentioned, it's likely to be around $518,000. That amount is subject to change based on the levels of participation. It's also subject to change in an upward manner if further settlements are reached. As you may know from following the news, that the large lawsuit against Purdue Pharmaceuticals is in bankruptcy, and there will likely be a large payout from bankruptcy. And one of those bankruptcy claims is the same claim that was made against Johnson & Johnson. And the attorneys who are handling the plaintiff's claims on behalf of the subdivisions and also the litigating counties and cities and the AG's office are likely to utilize this structure for payment of additional settlement monies that are included in the $26 billion as more and more cases begin to settle. And so that number, it could go down, but more likely will go up as more settlements are reached.
Any other comments or questions from council? I have a question. So is this going to obligate the city to have to be responsible for some programs that we don't offer right now? And if so, how are we going to pay for that or set all those up? What's the process?
So once the participation agreement comes out, those fine details will be worked out. But one, I think the city has existing programs and uses for approved opioid abatement expenditures already that the police department is utilizing. But there is the ability to pay back unexpended portions of the funds. And I know at least all indications is that monies received in any particular year do not necessarily have to be expended in that particular year. So those funds can be carried over until programs are developed that would qualify for use of those funds.
I got a question. Is one of the items that's eligible, could that be needle cleanups and such as that?
I assume that the categories will be broad enough to potentially include that within it. But again, we won't know for sure until the participation agreement is released, which is expected to be this month.
Thank you.
Sure.
So when the participation agreement comes out with all of the conditions and how you can spend the money, if we don't think we can create whatever programs need to be created or spend the money the way it's supposed to be spent, we can opt out and send it back. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. We can opt out of the settlement altogether and not receive any funds, or we can opt in, and to the extent particular funds are not expended, those funds can be delivered back to the state.
Okay. Any other questions from council? I don't see any hands raised from our participants, so do we want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve resolution 2021-37 and read by title only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Sienna?
Resolution 2021-37, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Fortuna approving participation in opioid settlement litigation with McKesson, Cardinal Health, Amerisource, Bergen, and Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Inc., and appointing the city manager as the city's authorized representative and authorizing the city manager to take all reasonable and necessary actions. Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Losi,
Yes.
Councilmember Stanfield,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes. All right, moving on to our next item is our first reading to amend Title 17, zoning regulations of the Fortuna Municipal Code, deleting section 17.06.183, second residential dwellings, and adding 17.06.001.5, accessory dwelling units, ordinance 2021-749. Staff report, please.
Thanks, Mayor Long. Liz Jory with our Community Development Department has a staff report. I just also wanted to point out that Rob Homeland with Plan West Partners and Vanessa Blodgett also are maybe contributing to the presentation.
Yeah, Honorable Mayor and council members. So we're glad to bring this draft ordinance to you tonight. It's been on our list. It's been on our planning priorities list and discussed at a previous council commission workshop. And it's one of the projects in the city's SB2 planning grants program. I will be turning it over to Plan West Partners for presentation of the ordinance itself. I just wanted to make a few comments. I think it helps to look at the recent history of the state and city activities in the past several years to kind of show the background and how we reached this point in making progress towards reconciling the state and local codes. This outline is in your staff report. I'll just go over it briefly. Really starting in 2016 is when the California legislature began passing a series of statewide ADU reform bills. for the purpose of accelerating housing and responding to their declared housing shortage emergency. And the series of laws was, the purpose of the state was to remove roadblocks to ADUs and affordable housing. And so they started requiring, removing local jurisdiction, local, potential for prohibiting or reducing the ability to produce ADUs by requiring that cities allow at least one ADU per single family home without a special or a ministerial or a special permit or, to make them ministerial, and mandating that cities that fail to adopt a local ordinance would be required to implement the state's, what became the government code. And this is a category that Fortuna fell into. Our was it the residential accessory dwelling unit code that had been in existence since like the late 70s didn't meet the state standard. So we had to automatically start implementing just the state standard. So we had no room for, tailoring it to the city's particular needs. In 2018, the council did place the ADU update on the priorities list. And then in 2018, we had our first workshop with the Planning Commission to introduce them to the, the upcoming ADU ordinance update and, introduce them to the state law and get them familiar with it. And then in 2019 and 20, the legislature adopted additional bills. These became even more restrictive on local agencies. And they removed additional barriers, in most cases, not allowing parking to be required, minimizing setbacks and building height and things like that. So those things, the state law is reflected in the ordinance for the most part. With the purpose of the local ordinance is to make it easier to implement the state law, because we've been just operating under the government code itself, which is, pretty convoluted, following all of their different amendments to it. And then the city was awarded the SB2 Planning Grants Program, which enabled us to work, to get some additional help with the SB2 or the ADU and other housing related programs that are in that grant. So that's what we've been working on for about the past year. We did have the Planning Commission and Council workshop, the joint session that was a year ago, which really introduced this current process that we're working under, and just give, confirmed direction to staff. So since that time, staff and Plan West partners have been working on the draft ordinance that's before you today. It did go to the Planning Commission in October. At that time, September and October, on the October 12th meeting, they did vote 5-0 at that public hearing to recommend that the City Council adopt the attached ordinance that's before you. So there has been a lot of work, action to get here, and outreach on the ADU ordinance, which has really set the foundation for where we're at now with the ordinance. And also included in your packet is the draft ADU handout, which will, be presented as a guide to homeowners and developers who want to construct an ADU. There's also the HCD ADU handbook, which kind of describes in their terms the requirements, and then also the actual state government code. So, before I turn it over, I just wanted to point out that, the state law is complicated. So, the ordinance also is somewhat complicated, but the purpose of the ordinance is to simplify it so that it's a little bit easier to implement, so that, also so that the city, so that we can be in conformance with the state law. The housing element does include a policy that, we update and become current with the state law, and that's something that HCD basically required in our housing element. So, we need to be here And what we've tried to do in the ordinance, or what we have done, I think we've accomplished it, is to also create standards where we do have discretion to, basically tailor it to Fortuna's needs, and, and to create flexibility in certain cases. So where the state might set a standard, say, for example, an ADU has to be at least 16 feet. We can't require that be less than that. So we've capped it at 16 feet. Leaving it open would allow, any height to be developed. So, we've at least capped it at 16, but then we worked in an element of flexibility so that, it can be reviewed on a case-by-case basis, and that height can be exceeded with issuance of a conditional use permit. So the ordinance itself, the two areas where there is discretion includes design standards, and then those types of development standards where, we can grant special circumstances where the state law allows us to have some flexibility. So with that little introduction, I will turn it over to, I think Rob is going to give the presentation, and Vanessa Blodgett is also here from Plan West Partners.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks for that great introduction and opening. Good evening, council members and staff. I'm going to jump right into a presentation here. So as Liz indicated, and the city manager, we're talking about deleting this section called second residential dwellings, which has been in your code for a while, and replacing it with accessory dwelling units. And that's because, for a number of reasons. So formerly under state regulations, the term was secondary dwelling units. That's no longer being utilized. So now we're talking about accessory dwelling units. And the reason this is important to bring up is you're not just passing an ordinance like normal. Typically, when you pass an ordinance on top of another ordinance, you're modifying that ordinance. But this secondary residential dwellings, while it's in your code and has been for a while, it hasn't actually applied since 2016. So in 2016, the state passed a accessory dwelling unit regulation requiring local jurisdictions to either adopt a new accessory dwelling unit ordinance, or to simply utilize the state's new regulations in 2016. And until tonight, the city has had this second residential dwelling ordinance that's just kind of sitting in your books, but unused. So that's an important nuance to understand. So why pass this ordinance? Well, we've got state law that now prevents the city from restricting property owners' rights to develop ADUs on their property. And that's for residentially zoned parcels. State law establishes minimum rights such as setbacks, height, size to prevent the city from making ADU development too difficult. So this is actually kind of unusual what the state's doing here. Often the state passes regulations to make development more difficult. In this case, the state is preventing local jurisdictions from making development difficult. So the state is favoring property owner rights and telling local jurisdictions you cannot hold back property owners from developing ADUs on their property. Another reason is the city, through this new set of state regulations, and it started in 2016, there was an update in 2018, and then another update beginning this year. The city may grant property owners additional rights, such as even smaller setbacks, taller heights, bigger unit size, and Liz referred to this, and I'll get into more detail. And those additional rights can either be over the counter so that they can be approved right there in City Hall, or through a discretionary process before either the Planning Commission or the council. And then finally, the city can also establish objective design standards to minimize the aesthetic impacts or potential aesthetic impacts of these new accessory dwelling units. So while the city cannot prevent them, and the state says we are favoring property owner rights and property owners are going to have the right to develop ADUs, the city can come up with some design standards to make sure that they fit into the neighborhoods where they're being installed. So we're, why pass this ordinance? To comply with state law. and to back up the state in establishing some minimum rights for property owners to develop ADUs on their property. And we have a mechanism through which property owners can get some additional rights, and that is a discretionary process that we've built into this ordinance, where the Planning Commission will hear the application of property owners that are seeking to build a little bit taller than what the ordinance says, or a little bit bigger. I'll show you in a moment. And then finally, this ordinance passes some objective design standards to minimize aesthetic impacts. So just a basic overview. Council has seen these before, but just for the audience and anyone that has forgotten, this is called a primary structure. It's the house on a residential property. An accessory dwelling unit is a second unit, has its own bathroom, kitchen, bedroom in it. Still complies with the California Building Code, but it's an entirely different residential unit on the same property. Could also look like this. So here's the primary structure, and then they have a standalone detached garage. Looks like they have a 2-car garage, and you can have an ADU above it that's completely detached from the house. And another example, this is purely theoretical here. This actually is a residential home in Fortuna, and they could have a primary structure. And then internal to this building, without you even knowing it, there could be an ADU in there, or this property owner could come forward to the city and say, I want to convert my extra bedroom into an accessory dwelling unit and install a kitchen and a bathroom in there and have a separate entrance. And other than that separate entrance, you would never know that an ADU had been installed inside of this property because it's entirely internal. So this graphic summarizes that. So just to make sure we're really clear, because this is important, the 3 different types of ADUs. We have detached ADUs, which are no modifications to the primary structure. You construct a standalone new residential unit on the same lot, and there is a visual difference in the lot after project completion. It's that new standalone structure. Then we have attached ADUs. It's like doing an addition onto your home. Somebody can add a bedroom, or they can add an ADU, and as you're driving by, you may not even know that there's a whole nother unit on this parcel. Maybe it's just an addition to their home, maybe it's an ADU. The thing that would give it away is actually a separate entrance. So this has very limited modifications to the existing primary structure. You construct a new attached unit on the same lot. There is a visual difference in the lot after project completion, but it looks very similar to a home addition. And then the third type is this internal ADU. In this case, they're showing ADU either in the attic or in a basement, which we're not going to have them in the basement here. But so an internal ADU is interior modification to the primary structure. There's no new building footprint, no new exterior buildings. If they were to do an interior modification and add a little bit extra, then we're talking about an attached ADU. So an internal ADU has no modifications to the exterior perimeter of the building except for a separate entrance, new entryway. Yep. So those are the 3 types of ADUs. So those are really important to understand in this ordinance. And then, as Liz pointed out, there is this 4-page handout that will make it really easy to communicate with applicants as they come in and say, hey, I'm interested in doing an accessory dwelling unit on my property. Or if somebody comes in and says, hey, my neighbor is building an ADU, I want to know more about it. The ordinance would be available to them, but this more easy to read, user-friendly version is available as well. And so in that is this summary table. I'm not going to go over this whole thing, but I encourage anyone that's interested to start with this table. And so it goes through all of the different standards, height and setback and parking and design, and then looks at each of the 3 types of ADUs. So it gives you the details on those. Then the next table to look at in the ordinance is also really helpful for understanding this. And so you've got, these aren't going to work, but this first column looks at the ADU types. Second column looks at which sections of the code apply to those types of ADUs. And then the third column tells you what kind of permits you would need. And so there are cases in which you can walk in and get an ADU approved at the counter without having to go to Planning Commission or City Council. It's a purely ministerial process, and others could require a discretionary process. So some State ADU law requirements that this code complies with, maximum floor area is one of them. So the city has to allow a floor area of at least 1,200 square feet for a detached ADU. For an attached ADU with 1 bedroom or less, you must allow 50% of the size of the structure has to be 50% of the existing primary dwelling unit, or 850 square feet, whichever is larger. And for an attached ADU with more than 1 bedroom, the city must allow 50% or 1,000 square feet, whichever is larger. So in all of these cases, it's always in favor of development, if there's 2 standards. And so the state's driver here is to create more housing and to provide more rights to property owners that want to build housing. Then we have setbacks. The city must allow accessory dwelling units a minimum setback of 4 feet from the side and rear property lines. Currently, in most of your single family residential zones, the setback is 5 feet. So this isn't substantially closer to the property line. The city can allow that 4 feet to be smaller, but can't force it to be larger. So this is one of those cases where, and the same with the bullet above, the state has set these standards where the city can be more favorable toward development, but not less favorable. We'll talk about that again in just a moment. Height, you must allow detached ADUs with a height of at least 16 feet. You can go above that, but you can't go below it. And then you have some options for discretionary overrides. So for maximum floor area, whereas if we look at this slide here, we've got these numbers, 1,200, 50%, 850, 1,000 square feet, et cetera. The city can set up a system where the applicant requests a larger floor area through a public hearing before the Planning Commission, and that is written into this ordinance. Setbacks, there can be a situation where an applicant can say, hey, I want to be closer than 4 feet from the property line. And so they can get a conditional use permit, go before the Planning Commission. Planning Commission can turn them down or review their case and say, typically we want to allow an ADU to get closer than 4 feet, but in your case, in these unusual circumstances, it totally makes sense. So we built this in so that, in unusual circumstances, the Planning Commission can make that decision. They can also hear the arguments of neighbors and ultimately deny that request. Same as for height, applicant may request taller heights than 16 feet through a public hearing before the Planning Commission. And then design standards I'll go through in a moment. The applicant may deviate from those design standards through a public hearing. So design standards come in 2 different categories. One, we've got architectural details. There are architectural detail requirements for non-historic properties or properties that are not designated historic. And primarily that really is just limited to requiring that the exterior materials are the same as the primary dwelling, with a couple of notes. And this can be overridden by the Planning Commission through a discretionary process. And the roof materials for attached ADUs have to be the same. And these are only for attached ADUs. Then we look at historic properties, and there's a number of requirements there. And I'm not going to go into the details of those, but I can come back to this if you have questions. Some additional design standards, the entrance orientation for detached ADUs. So the primary entrance of a detached accessory dwelling unit has to face the front or interior of a parcel unless the ADU is directly accessible from an alley or public street. This just prevents someone from building an ADU and then having a blank wall that faces the street and turning its back to the street, therefore decreasing the quality of the neighborhood and the walking environment, and turning into their own little internal village. The ADU has to have a relationship with the neighborhood the same way that the house has a relationship with the neighborhood. There are some standards about privacy impacts. This more or less prevents, since the house is going to be so close to the property line, or could be anyway, it could be up to 4 feet from the property line. This prevents somebody from building an ADU right up against their neighbor's property line and neighbor's house, and then having big windows that glare into their neighbor's bedroom. So there's some standards here on how that works. And the same is true for second story decks and balconies. This is to limit someone building an ADU and then having a balcony that is 4 feet from the property line and peering into the neighbor's yard. And then outdoor stairs, this is more of an aesthetic requirement to prevent unsightly outdoor stairs. And then here's the details on how to deviate from those standards and receive a conditional use permit. So there's a lot more I could have shared, but decided to try to keep this simple. And I've got other content available to help answer questions if you have any. Let me pause there. And Liz or Merritt, do you want to say anything additional, or should we go to question and answer?
No, I think that was a great presentation, Rob, really focusing on what the state requirements are, how we chose to handle those, and with the design standards, how we try to really protect aesthetic and privacy and some of the other issues that have been brought up.
All right, we will open public comment. And then we will go to the council first. Cammie has her hand up.
I have a couple of questions. My first one on the 4-foot side and rear setbacks, is that for all zoning? Because we have bigger setbacks for larger lots, but does that pertain to this, or is the 4-foot for any size lot?
The 4-foot is for any size lot, any residential zone district for accessory dwelling units.
Okay, and then my next question is, does the ADU have to be smaller than the main house?
No, that's a complicated question. It would be very unusual. So there was a planning commissioner that asked a similar question, and I did some research. And as far as I can tell, there are no residential structures in the city limits of Fortuna in which an ADU would be bigger because of that 850 square foot limitation. It's theoretically possible, in which case we would recommend that staff have a conversation with the property owner and say, you know, we've heard anecdotally that this could potentially cause problems for homeowner insurance if having the accessory dwelling unit larger than the primary unit, but the city doesn't regulate that. So to answer your question directly, it is theoretically possible, but in my review, I don't think it would actually occur in the city of Fortuna.
I just have one more question. Is there any percentage of ground cover that needs to be left open, or can they cover the whole lot with a ADU if the lot's small?
Yeah, so the question is about the term site coverage is what we use in the planning field. And so what percent of the total parcel or site can be covered with structures? And there is a limit. I don't have it memorized. I think I see Vanessa scrolling through trying to help me find it. I think it might be 25%, but there's some percent of the lot that you cannot exceed between the primary structure and the new ADU, and all, you know, if you have a shed or, you know, anything like that, there's a maximum percentage. And unfortunately, I don't have it memorized, but there is a percentage that you cannot exceed.
It's 50%, Rob.
I would say it's
Yep.
in this report. 50% is in there somewhere. I saw it.
Fantastic.
Anyone
Does that
else?
answer your question?
Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
Anyone else from the council have questions or comments? Jeremy's got his hand up.
Yeah, so that was one of my questions about lot coverage, and if it's 50%, is that an increase based on this ordinance change, or is that what it's always been?
The lot coverage right now in like the R16, which is our most common, is 35%. So it is an increase over what our zoning standards have as a minimum.
So forgive me, but let's say we have a 2,400 square foot house on a 6,000 square foot city lot. We wouldn't be able to put a 1,200 square foot ADU with this particular limitation.
That sounds right, yes.
So would that be something that could go to the planning commission if it made sense to change that?
As written currently, would you interpret it that way, Liz, Vanessa?
I would interpret it that way. That it could go to the planning commission for a deviation from the standard.
Okay. And I might have misheard you, Rob. Did I hear that it has to be at least 16 feet, or can it be less than 16 feet in height?
Can be less. There's going to be building code requirements, so you can't have like a little door that you have to crawl through, right? But yes, it can be smaller than 16 feet. It's that the city cannot set the maximum height to be less than 16 feet. So we put it right at 16 feet because we couldn't go lower. The Planning Commission can, through a discretionary process, allow it to go higher. But no, that is a maximum height, not a minimum height. And then another thing to point out about that is that for attached ADUs, the height of the ADU that's attached to the existing structure cannot exceed the height of the existing structure without Planning Commission approval. And then even they can only allow it to go up to the maximum height established in that zone district already, which I think is 32.
Yeah, I think it is.
Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Another question I have is regarding the requirements for code. If I have a 1956 house and I want to put a 2021 ADU in the backyard, I have a 3/4 inch line to my main house. Are you going to require a new 1 inch line because of sprinklers? Are sprinklers going to be required? Or are there going to be standards regarding solar and energy calculations for the new dwelling? Or are they going to go back? Are they going to be greater than the existing structure?
So a lot of questions to answer there. I'll start with the sprinkler one. Sprinklers are not required for ADUs, though they are for other types of residential structures. We would have to have either your city manager or someone from Public Works answer the question about the utility requirements.
Yeah, my expectation would be that if there's a service size that's suitable, the intention of the ordinance is to treat it as not as a new structure, but part of the existing house. So just like we wouldn't require a new service line to something in the existing house, we wouldn't require a new service line to the ADU unless it was needed for capacity and requested by the owner.
What about electrical?
That would all follow building code. And, you know, I think there's a lot of questions you could get into regarding the building code, but I think that, I guess the general overview is that you're not supposed to treat it like a new structure other than what falls under the ADU. It's supposed to be, you know, I think the intention is to treat it as an extension of the existing house and not have the requirements that would go with a new house. I know that's pretty general, Councilmember Stanfield, but I think that's what the intention of this ordinance and the state law is.
Okay, my questions are related to try and make it as easy as possible for people to use this opportunity. So things like, do you need a separate meter for gas and electricity? Do you need a separate meter, or do you need a separate water hookup? Or can it be tied into the existing line? I just want to make this as easy as possible for the people that choose to use this opportunity.
Yeah, you would not require, it would not require a second water hookup. I'm not sure about PG&E, but my understanding is that I don't think it would, but we wouldn't determine that. That would be determined. PG&E would determine whether or not that was required. And I don't know the answer to that question.
And so what about the solar?
Yeah. Rob, did you know the answer for the solar question?
Yeah, the answer to that would not fall within this particular ordinance, but within the building code. And so it depends on how the state requires building code updates on additions to, well, if you're talking about attached ADU, I think it would be a different answer than a detached ADU, but it's really a building code question. So while I would love to be able to answer your question, it depends on how the city enacts and enforces the building code. So it's not regulated by what you're passing tonight.
It's not. Okay, thank you.
So I want to back up a minute because it does talk about solar being required on a detached ADU in here somewhere. I read that today. And also for the maximum lot coverage of 50%, it does not say that that is negotiable or that can be changed by the Planning Commission. It's actually in the ordinance as lot coverage. It's very specific. It does not say you can change that.
So let's take those one at a time. So I'm looking at your ordinance currently, and
I can start with kind of when deviating from standards.
Okay.
So there's a section up front in D2. And it's on the top of page 12 of the agenda
Thank
item.
you.
So it says when deviating from standards. So this section basically says, so if a proposed accessory dwelling unit that deviates from standards in subsection H, it can be reviewed and approved or denied subject to design review. And any ADU that deviates from standards in subsection G, the development standards, which is where I believe the lot coverage standards are, can be reviewed and may be approved or denied subject to a use permit. So this section basically covers.
So G, okay, I see what you're saying. I think that as this is written, it's very confusing. You have to look a lot of places to find information. I don't know how we fix that, but to me, I know this stuff. And for me, reading this and looking through this, it's very confusing. So I just wonder about your normal person who's not involved in construction or development or building, tries to read through this. I think that it's going to be difficult. Michael,
I think
go ahead.
I think our staff and consultant team did the best they could. There's kind of a lot of what ifs, and the important thing, I think it's going to take some time working through this. And I think if there's ways we can simplify it over time, we will, but I think it's really going to take a little bit of time working through this. And one of the important things was that it wasn't absolute. And as Vanessa pointed out, that when we have deviations from the standards, that there's always a discretionary process. So there's not like a no, you can't do it as a result of the design standards or development standards, and that there's always a process for the discretionary permit. So I think the big difference is now a lot of these may fall under a discretionary process. A lot of these would fall under discretionary process. A lot of them would qualify for ministerial process in the future. And I think that was the point, to make it easier. And there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of information, and it's kind of when you start getting into the if then, it's tricky to write it in a very linear, easy fashion. So we did our best here, and that's what you have.
Yeah, I think it's really a function of the state standards that have identified all these different types of ADUs and different sets of standards that apply to them. And then having to follow that format and then adding on the sections for deviating from the standards. So it's really a function of what we've been provided, and then, wanting to make exceptions for them. So, I think, to me, if I visualize, the first half of the ordinance is about those state standards, and then definitely, yeah, we do have to wade through the deviations or the exceptions process. But, staff is available, we have pre-application meetings, or we're available at the counter. And even now, when people are considering an ADU, they always have to come to the city for an explanation of the code. So, we're used to that, and, we'll get more comfortable with this as it goes along. This has been a good learning process for staff as well. And it's definitely getting easier. The more we implement these, the more clear it's going to be. But yeah, we definitely expect to be explaining and kind of hand holding as we help people with these.
Michael,
I think that was the point.
Go ahead.
I think our handout was really trying to simplify the requirements. And I think over time, that would be an area we could focus on, is really try to make those handouts simple and run through examples. And some things other cities have done, which we didn't do with this, but they've actually put together, over-the-counter plans that an applicant could purchase or for a small fee, or that they could use and not even have to do the design. So there's a lot of ways that we could expand this and make it easier over time.
One question on the 50% lot coverage. What is R1 zoning, Liz? Is that like the R16, the 6,000 square feet, or what is that referring to?
Yeah, it's the R16 and R110 that both have that 35% coverage.
Okay, Mike Losey, you've had your hand up for a while.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make a couple of comments, more than questions. First off, I think staff, as well as Plan West, have done an excellent job putting this together. The ordinance, the handout, the 4-page handout. It's very, I think it's simplifies the issues, but I do understand that people are probably going to have to come into City Hall to get some specific information. Some of us have been dreading this time when these ordinances will have to be accepted. Basically, the state's taken away single-family housing and taken away a lot of the choices that our local governments have, including Fortuna. I know the Planning Commission really wrestled with this ordinance, and I can tell them that we feel your pain. But this ordinance does allow Fortuna to include a few local choices, such as the design standards, and so I think it does allow us to do that. But it is not something that, for those of us who appreciate local control, are looking to embrace. Well, that's all I'd like to say.
Madam Mayor, can I
Absolutely. Go ahead.
share something about solar? So this is not your ordinance, this is guidance from the state here. So it indicates that newly constructed ADUs are subject to the energy code requirement to provide solar panels if it's newly constructed, non-manufactured, and a detached ADU. As far as I can tell, this is not written into the ordinance that's before you tonight. Like I said earlier, this would be something that would be enforced by your building inspector, your building chief building official, and their implementation of the building code. So correct me if I'm wrong, Vanessa or Liz, but I don't think there's anything about solar in the ordinance before council tonight. It's a building code.
I didn't see anything in there, Rob, so I think you're correct.
Okay. And thank you, Madam Mayor, for pointing that out. That, yeah, the state does require that, but that's a building code requirement.
Anyone else have questions? Jeremy, you got your hand up again, or is it still up from last time?
It's up again.
Okay.
So is that an easy interpretation to say that an attached ADU would not have that solar requirement?
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, that's my interpretation. Ultimately, your chief building official is going to make their determination.
Okay. One other thing too, I noticed JADU and ADU. So a junior accessory dwelling unit, is that as if there's already a mother-in-law unit in the backyard and you can additionally add?
A junior accessory dwelling unit is a type of internal accessory dwelling unit. So if you recall, an internal accessory dwelling unit doesn't change the footprint of the existing structure at all. It's contained entirely within the existing structure as it exists. But a junior ADU is like one of those internal ADUs, but even smaller. So it cannot exceed 500 square feet. And it doesn't have to have its own bathroom. So it has to have its own separate entrance, and it has to have at least a really mini kitchen. And there's like, I think it's 4 linear feet of counter space and 4 linear feet of cabinet space and a 2-burner stove. But it doesn't have to have its own bathroom. So it would have an interior door to the other unit, the primary unit, to share a bathroom. So that's the state's requirement and definition of a junior accessory dwelling unit. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Rob, can we go back to Councilmember Stanfield's question about solar? I had a different interpretation. So reading that requirement again, and if you want to share it, I think newly constructed ADUs are required. Yes, newly constructed ADUs are subject to the energy code.
Detached, I think, is the word that.
Detached, yeah.
So his question, I believe, was if it's attached.
Oh, okay.
Does it have to provide solar panels? And as I'm reading this, I would think that the answer is no, but I think it requires a closer reading of the building code and it requires a closer read of the state building code.
Okay. I didn't catch the attached versus detached.
Anyone else have questions?
I have one last question and I'll be quiet.
You don't have. Yeah, that's
Questions regarding like, Merritt, you kind of alluded to the fact that this is going to be a living, breathing document. We're going to work through some of the kinks as they come up. So is this going to be something that's brought back with kind of an update at some time in the future, talking about successes and pitfalls, so that we can make this as user friendly as possible?
Yeah, I think it'll take going through this a few times to really kind of see where we have any hiccups, or if we find something that, seems like it's not working correctly. And, I'd say if we see a lot of interest and we want to pursue off the, over the counter plans for people, to simplify and make it easier. Really, the goal here is to create more housing. That's what the state is really, putting on us. And as Rob said in his presentation earlier, the ordinance we have right now doesn't mean anything now because it defers to the state. So, really, again, not to go into too much detail, but we looked at the areas where we thought that it was important to kind of preserve some of the design elements in neighborhoods. And so we kept those as discretionary, or we identified the thresholds, which you couldn't go above without a discretionary permit. And so we really tried to, have balance between what the state's requiring and the things that we have the ability to have discretion on. Which ones would would our residents want to see? Just like everybody, they wouldn't want to see a second store balcony overlooking their yard. Those are the kind of things that we really wanted to make sure to protect and not have come up.
Okay. And then,
but yes, so we, if the council, if you do get feedback, we'd be happy to bring it back. I know some of you are in the real estate field, some are in the building field. And so if you're hearing from folks as this gets rolled out, we're more than happy to bring it back. We really just want it to work well for the city is our goal.
yeah, Liz mentioned an outreach was made. So do you have builders that you spoke to that kind of helped you guide what you ultimately put as in front of us tonight?
We didn't do like a mass distribution of information. We formed the stakeholders committee that included builders and other related kind of professionals. And they we had 2 meetings with them, or the initial meeting introducing the concepts and their role in it, and then their review of the draft ordinance, in addition to the public noticing of the planning commission meetings and the council meeting.
I wanted to say, if any of these questions sounded adversarial, they weren't intended that way. And I appreciate all you guys' efforts and hard work on this. I'm glad it's in front of us.
Thanks. Yeah, and to build on Liz's comment there, the stakeholder group consisted of a number of property owners, building owners, developers, and their feedback was really integral in the development of this. And I would love for it to be less convoluted and confusing, but we had to work within the state's mandates, and so we try our best to make it user friendly while still applying all of the nuances of what the state allowed and didn't allow. But the stakeholder group was really helpful in coming up with design standards that were relevant to Fortuna.
Thank you. Merritt, it might be interesting to try to come up with approved plans, just because every lot shape is different, every layout of the existing house versus what you could put on there in the room you might have. I don't know that that would be a good use of city funds, but we can wait and see what happens. So anyone else?
Okay.
Comments? Oh, Merritt, do you want to say something? Okay. I don't see anyone from the public with hands up. So it's back to the council.
I was going to say that I believe the county has 2 or 3 plans that they've taken upon themselves voluntarily to update to the latest code that are across the counter approved plans. So maybe if we can reach out to them, and if they fit what we have in front of us, maybe we can offer the same thing to developers or property owners.
Yes, thank you. We can reach out to them. That's a good idea. I'll see what they have and get back to you on that.
Anyone else? Thank you, Rob and Vanessa, for being here tonight. We appreciate it. Does anyone want to make a motion? No? Okay, guys.
Dragging our feet.
What?
Dragging our feet, kicking and screaming.
Well, yeah, some of the stuff, we're totally losing local control, and it's very frustrating to think that you could have a 16-foot or taller structure right next to your property line at 4 feet. That's just crazy.
Well, I don't see an option here. I'll go ahead and move to hold the first reading of ordinance 2021-749, read by title only, and continue the public hearing to Monday, November 15th, 2021 for the second reading.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that, but I did have one more question that I just thought of. Can I ask that now?
Of course.
Does this overrule neighborhoods that have homeowners associations?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second.
Right? That's how we kind of all feel. We have a motion and a second. Sienna?
Ordinance 2021-749, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Fortuna, amending Title 17 zoning regulations of the Fortuna Municipal Code, deleting Section 17.06.183 second residential dwellings, and adding 17.06.001.5 accessory dwelling units. Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Losi,
Holding my nose, yes.
Councilmember Stanfield,
Yes to the first reading.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Grudgingly, yes. All right, moving on. Thank you again, Rob and Vanessa. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Our next item is consider approval of supplemental budget request for rollover of fiscal year 2021 Measure E funds to fiscal year 21-22. Staff report, please.
And Cameron Mole, our Parks Director, is with us. He's going to give the staff report, and I can help provide a little bit of background once Cameron finishes with his staff report if needed.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So last year, last fiscal year, that is, fiscal year 2020, 2021, we allocated $80,000 worth of Measure E funding and an anticipated grant match for a Proposition 68 per capita allocation. That's the 2018 Parks and Water Bond. We were informed in 2020 that of our total amount. So basically we were thinking that, maximum amount was going to be $200,000, and that we were hoping to partner with the Roner Community Recreation and Park District, who's also going to receive that maximum of $200,000 amount. Hence, a combined total of $400,000 for a project. The 20% match was the $80,000 we identified in last fiscal year for that project. Turns out in 2020, we were notified that our amounts were going to be a little bit shy of $200,000, and they were $177,982 per entity, and that we were not going to be required to do a 20% grant match based on the median household income of the area that was identified for our project being under the state's requirements. The project identified was the acquisition of the 8.4 acre parcel adjacent to Newburgh Park. And so it was left unspent for last fiscal year, and we'd like to be able to utilize it for this current fiscal year Measure E funding. And we'd like to be able to split that $80,000 into a couple different projects. One already exists, and that's the General Parks and Acquisitions Measure E project, and that currently has $200,000 in it. So we were hoping to allocate 30 of that 80 into there, giving us a total of $230,000 for that project. And because the Roner Community Recreation and Park District was kind enough to roll over their $177,982 to assist with the purchase of that property of Newburgh Park and expand Newburgh Park, we felt it was appropriate to help them with their endeavor of helping to fund a project for a benefit assessment, which was identified as the ideal route for the Roner Rec District to take in order to pay for the operation and maintenance costs of a future aquatic center and swimming pool, which is their main goal. And so we'd like to help assist them with starting that project as soon as possible, as early as this fiscal year, so they can get the ball rolling on that. That said, I do have an attached supplemental budget request. I did want to make note that I did make a minor mistake on that supplemental budget request attachment. It's in the purpose area, and I basically transposed the two amounts. So basically what it should read is adjustments to the fiscal year 21-22 Measure E budget to account for a rollover of $80,000 of unused Measure E funds from fiscal year 2020-21 for an originally anticipated Prop 68 per capita grant match into the Measure E fiscal year 2021-2022 budget, $30,000 added in the general park acquisition and improvements, and $50,000 for a Roner Community Recreation Park District benefit assessment project. So I just wanted to make that clarification. I appreciate Walt Wilson had identified that today and let me know. He's the chair for the Measure E committee. So with that, we'd like to be able to utilize those funds that were unused into this year for those purposes. And I'm happy to answer any questions if council or any members have any questions.
Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Walt, for catching that. We'll open public comment on this item. And does anyone from the council have any questions or comments?
Can I just be real clear that this was already earmarked for these two items and it's just being rolled over because it didn't happen last year? Or are these discretionary uses of the funds, like contrary to Measure E recommendation?
It would be an addition. So the general park improvements already existed. So the $30,000 would be an addition. However, that $50,000 would be a new project utilizing Measure E funds.
Any other questions? Does anyone from the public have any comments or questions? No one on our Zoom has their hand up. If you want to call in, there should be a number on your screen if you want to add to our discussion. Tammy.
Did the Measure E committee hear this and approve this? Or recommend this, I mean?
They have not recommended or approved this at this time, no.
And we will be bringing it to the next meeting, but so far the Measure E committee has been very supportive of park acquisition projects, enhancing recreational opportunities. And I think in this case, and I want to emphasize a point that Cameron made, the Roner Community Recreation and Park District sent $177,000 the city's way. And I think it's important. This is really the last step. This $50,000 would be the last step for the Roner Rec District to get to identify a means to fund the pool project and put it out for a community decision whether they want to fund it or not. So it really gets us to a pivotal point in the whole effort to bring a pool or not. And, you know, we considered trying to use, as Cameron pointed out in his staff report, the Roner Community Recreation and Park District can't use Prop 68 funds for something that might be identifying a tax or an assessment. So there's really, other than city general fund dollars going towards this or fundraising, there's not really another source of funding that we've been able to identify that could advance their mission to the point where we can actually see whether or not the community supports a funding source. So again, this is a critical step for the Roner Rec District, and our hope is to get it out there again for a community decision and then really see if the community wants a pool or not. And again, I think it is in line with what the Measure E committee has indicated, you know, their desire for improving and expanding parks and recreational opportunities.
It almost seems like it should have gone to them first.
their meeting schedule doesn't allow it, and we certainly can bring that to them. And if that's something the council wants to see, we could bring it at our next meeting. Our finance director, let's see, I have the date, I could give it to
I
you.
think
but
it's in December.
Yeah, if you'd like us to bring it to the Roner Rec District, to the Measure E Committee meeting, we certainly could.
While you are on this meeting, do you have any comments or thoughts on that?
There we go.
Go ahead.
I talked to Merritt a little, I'm sorry, I need to wake up. I talked to Cameron a little bit about this today, and I had a little trouble wrapping my mind around the whole concept of this thing, but I came to the conclusion that Cameron came out way ahead on this deal. That he managed to get the pool committee to commit upwards of almost $200,000 toward the acquisition of that piece of ground next to the park. And he's kind of rewarding them for that. And I don't have a problem with that, actually. I finally did get my mind wrapped around it. And it certainly would be appropriate to bring it to the E committee if the council thinks that's really necessary at this point.
Okay, thank you all.
Can I add one more point of clarification that might help? One of the projects that the Measure E committee identified in their list of projects was a basketball court in Roner Park. And we considered using the Prop 68 funds for the basketball court in Roner Park and taking those funds that the Measure E committee designated for that and instead build that with Prop 68 instead of the Measure E committee funds. That way the Measure E project was going through, and the Measure E committee and the public would see the same projects completed, but because the purchase of the property will take every bit of the funds that that Prop 68 has, then it didn't really make sense to kind of do that swap just to keep it clean on paper. It made more sense to us to just have the entire amount go to the city and then the city to accomplish both goals. So I don't know if that makes sense, but we're going to accomplish the projects that the Measure E committee wanted. And we took the entirety of the Roner Rec District's funding. And we could have split it out in the Prop 68 money and done a separate application for the basketball court and made it so we had, one for one, but it really didn't make sense because we were using all of the funds available from Roner Community Recreation Park District as well. I don't know if that cleared it up or confused it more.
Okay, Jeremy, you put your hand down. It looks like Tammy still has her hand up. Tammy?
I kind of had that same concern that Mayor Long had about going ahead of our Measure E committee and approving something without them seeing it, because I do value that committee and I don't want them to think that, we're just going above their heads and doing something. So that kind of does concern me a little bit.
Well, if I may, I can make a suggestion that we don't take action on this item tonight. We take it back to the Measure E committee in December for their review, and then we can bring it back and just put it on a consent calendar agenda item at a future council meeting, if that would make you all feel happier.
Do we miss any deadlines or any opportunities that we needed to have this approved by a certain date?
It just shortens the time frame that we can start the benefit assessment. We just have to wait until we get the final approval from City Council after it's reviewed by Measure E to start that project instead of starting that project after tonight.
It won't delay any of the Prop 68 activity on the purchase of the property from the Eel River Valley Community Foundation. That's going to move forward. It'll just delay any activity on the Roner Rec District benefit assessment for 2 months till after the new year.
Walt has his hand up. Yes.
We might consider having a special E-committee meeting.
That's what I was going to suggest next. And I don't know how flexible all of those members are, but that might move it forward a little faster if that was possible.
We can certainly do that if the council would like.
I mean, this is Tammy and I, so there's 3 other council members. What are you guys thinking?
I like the idea of taking it before the Measure E committee. And I like that it validates their, shows the importance of what they do and then keeping, and especially when we just passed Measure G, it keeps everything in the public eye and is accomplishing the purpose of the ballot measure.
I agree with that.
Jeremy.
Yeah, my hesitation was more out of an honor thing, just because I wanted to make sure the Measure E committee didn't feel like we were circumventing them and making a decision with the funds that they recommend towards us. So, but after hearing Merritt, it's kind of, there's one piece of pie, and however you slice it up, whether it's Prop 68 or whether it's Measure E money already committed to a similar project, it seems like it's all the same thing. So I'm happy to wait. If Measure E can put together an emergency meeting, that'd be great. I think I can express my gratitude towards them and still vote on this tonight if the rest of the council wants to, but it's not out of lack of respect for their contribution.
One just addition, Mayor Long, I would just add that the Measure E committee has a budget item and they've been very supportive and put a high priority on enhancing parks and activities and improvements within parks. And so it was staff's feeling that this fell within that to provide a new recreational resource. It's been highly prioritized. And so they just have the general item in their budget recommendation, but staff's happy to go either way. And my guess is that we'll see the committee support this.
And I don't think you're wrong. I just think public perception is such that we said we were going to have an oversight committee. And I think that when we start making decisions without going to our oversight committee, I think it just looks bad. My personal opinion.
So then we will have another meeting of the Measure E committee, and then we'll bring this back to council for with a recommendation for approval after that meeting.
Okay, so do we need to do anything tonight, or just do we need a motion? What do we do?
Motion to table or?
Table it?
I just think there's no motion and the item just dies. I don't think we need any action if the council's not going to approve it.
So is the council in agreement that they want to send it back to the Measure E committee? We need to know that first. All right, 5 of 5. All right, there's your direction. Thank you. All right, our next item is a public hearing to receive public comment concerning unmet transit needs. Staff report, please.
Cameron Moeller, Parks Director, has this item as well. Go ahead, Cameron.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks again, Mayor, City Council. So this is an annual public hearing that we do each year related to our transit system. So just to give you a quick background about, and for the public mostly, what the city of Fortuna provides as far as transit. So we have basically 2 transportation systems. One is called Fortuna Transit, and that is what's called a demand response system, otherwise known as a dial-a-ride service. Where Fortuna citizens can call in to the office and schedule an appointment for pickup anywhere inside the city limits. And then we also contract with HTA, that's Humboldt Transit Authority, to operate their Redwood Transit system through the city of Fortuna. Theirs is considered a fixed route system. So those are the two options for citizens here. The city of Fortuna system is for citizens that are 50 and older and or persons with a disability. And of course, ours does not operate 7 days a week like the RTS. Ours operates Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We also offer rides on Tuesdays outside of city limits to Eureka for medical appointments. That is a Measure E funded project and has been for the last few years due to the fact that there are not as many medical providers in the city of Fortuna. And so basically, we receive there's a Transportation Development Act, and there are statutes in the TDA that require transit operators to hold these public hearings every year. And so our Regional Transportation Planning Agency, or RTPA, is HCOG, that's Humboldt County Association of Governments. And so they assist us with these public hearings and reminding us and making sure that each transit agency does hold an unmet transit needs hearing. And those are all posted publicly so people can make comments. And so in order for us to be able to spend the remaining portion of our TDA funds, our local transportation funds, we need to hold this process every year. That will free up roughly $60,000 of our $404,000 of our LTF, or local transportation funds. So tonight, again, the primary purpose is to allow the public to make a comment. City Council will not be taking any action, or there will be no motion this evening, just to hear the public's comments on whether or not some of our needs are reasonable to meet or not. And there are certain definitions that are outlined in the attachment that's provided with the staff report that outlines what is an unmet transit need and if it's reasonable to be met. After the unmet transit needs public hearings, the SSTAC, which is the Social Services Technical Advisory Committee through HCOG, will review all of the unmet transit needs and help determine whether or not all of those needs are reasonable to meet or not before making any changes. So that's my spiel, and I'm happy to turn it over to Stevie Luther, who we have here tonight from HCOG, is with us. There he is. So Steve, if I missed anything, please feel free to chime in and go ahead. And if you wanted to say anything, please feel free at this time.
Yeah, thank you, Cameron. Not a whole lot to add. I just wanted to mention, if members of the public who aren't at this meeting still want to comment, you can go to hcaog.net, and we have an online survey that you can fill out. Thanks.
Thank you for being here. We'll open the public hearing, and if you want to comment on this item, call the number on your screen, or if you are already in our meeting, please raise your hand. I am seeing no hands. We'll give it another few seconds to see if anyone calls in. When we were meeting in person, we usually had a couple people come and talk to us about this, and I think that the Zoom thing has put people off, which is frustrating. So no hands, no calls. All right. So we need a motion to forward the comments to HCOG, which we didn't get any comments. So what do we do, Cameron?
There are no comments, so there's nothing to forward to HCOG at this time. So basically, they will document if anyone sends them an email or attends at their board meetings or public hearings, then they'll certainly take note of any of those comments. But at this time, there is nothing to take forward to HCOG for this meeting, for this public hearing, as there was no comment.
Okay. Thanks for your report and for getting us in line with all of our whatever we have to meet. I don't know what you call it.
A lot of acronyms.
All right. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Mayor?
Yes.
Cameron, rather than just check the box saying we didn't get any public comment, I'm curious, it can't be probably officially recorded, but has there been any comments about how we could enhance our transportation through people that use the service?
There have been over the course of the years. Of course, we do this on an annual basis, so I can't include comments into this year that were mentioned previous years. But of course, there are some people that would like to see us extend our service 7 days a week. But seeing as how, you know, our dispatch office and our Parks and Recreation office and staff are only available Monday through Friday, that was not able to have been met. You know, some would, I'm sure, would like to see us go outside of the city limits, but due to limitations on our funding, 5310 funding, we have to stay inside the city limits. So other than that, you know, we generally, you know, I don't want to sound too arrogant here, but we don't get a lot of negative comments about our service. We get mostly positive comments. That's a good thing. And I think if, you know, Stephen could probably confer on this, but historically, if you look back, there haven't been a whole lot of comments in general, and especially there haven't been a whole lot of negative comments or comments about how we can improve, mostly comments about how well we've been doing, quite frankly.
That's great. Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to forward comments received during the public hearing to HCOG for consideration for unmet transit needs, or the lack thereof.
We don't have any comments, so we don't need to do that. We can just.
Oh, you don't need a motion?
No. We
Okay.
have no comments.
I would just ask, what is the closing date for comments?
It is December 31st.
All right, thank you, Stevie. I appreciate that. And in my council report, I will make a note of that, so someone watching later.
All right, that is our business items. Now we have a discussion about our ARPA funds, and we're gonna have a presentation by our finance director, Aaron Finley.
Mayor Long, before we get to the presentation, the reason we brought this item is we've been aware and made the council aware of the American Rescue Plan Act funds for some time. And what we did was incorporated those into the city budget when we were anticipating those. And so we really just wanted to have the ability for the council to discuss the usage of those funds and bring them at one time. And so we could look at the range of projects in their entirety instead of one at a time. And so really this is, you know, the purpose of the discussion item tonight is just to go through those, look at the amount of funds that we're projected to get, what the allowable use is, and then, you know, really make available for the public what we're doing with those, as well as bring a few ideas of how we could spend some of the remaining funds that aren't allocated yet.
Okay, thank you. Aaron?
All right, well, thank you for that introduction, and good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. So as Merritt mentioned, we're going to kind of just run through, I'm going to give a little bit of a backstory to what the American Rescue Plan Act funds are, where they came from for the public's knowledge, as well as council. It's been, I think, about 6 months since staff has reviewed this with the council. So just as a little back history, what is the purpose of the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA? And that is to mitigate the fiscal effects stemming from the public health emergency caused by COVID. And what is included in ARPA? ARPA provided almost over $350 billion in emergency funding for state, local, territorial, and tribal governments to remedy the mismatch between rising costs and falling revenues. So it's really meant to help with COVID. And the city did receive the first half, which is $1,466,307 on July 13th. And the city is scheduled to get the second payment in the same amount in July of 2022. And so that gives the total expected revenue amount of just shy of $3 million. These are one-time money, so we don't expect to receive these you know, in future years. It's just kind of a one or a two payment, and then we're done. So what can these ARPA funds be spent on? There was 5 categories that were released by the Department of Finance. And those are, number 1, to support public health expenditures. And that also includes public safety officers. They included public safety in the public health description. So that is one good point for the city. The second one was to address negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency. This one is very broad and was meant to include a range of things, and we'll kind of highlight some of those in our recommended projects. The third one was to replace lost public sector revenue, and the Department of Finance has since released a formula for how that can be determined. The fourth was to provide premium pay for essential workers. And then the last one was to provide funding to invest in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So some additional requirements for the council to keep in mind for ARPA spending. The funds do need to be spent by December 31st, 2024. Otherwise, we will have to return those to the Department of Treasury. All grantees shall provide the Department of Treasury with periodic reports, and those will need to detail the accounting and the uses of the funds. A few months ago, we have set up our online portal where we'll be reporting those. So we're all set up and we're ready to go. And then lastly, all spending activities will subject the city to the single audit requirements. And those requirements are any non-federal entity that spends more than $750,000 in federal award funds during its fiscal year. And the city usually kind of runs into the single audit requirement once every 3 to 4 years. We did one last year, so with this, we anticipate doing those over the course of the next couple of years. So what has the city of Fortuna included in the budget? What are we planning on spending our ARPA funds on? So you can see $2 million was included in the budget for the police department facility remodel project. And that was is an allowable use under the category of support public health expenditures. The second project that was included in the budget for this current fiscal year was police department officer base pay / revenue recovery. And so that $300,000 was used to help offset the general fund deficit that we had in fiscal year 2021-22. And so those that project can go under 2 categories: support public health expenditures, as well as replace lost public sector revenue. And then the final project that we have included in our fiscal year 21-22 budget came to the council a few council meetings ago by way of a supplemental budget request, and that is to upgrade the audio-visual equipment in the city council chambers. And that can fall under the category of addressing negative economic impacts caused by the public health emergency. That project is primarily due to having to do dual meetings by way of Zoom and in person. And so you can see of the over 2.9 million, we've already included in the budget 2.3 million. So we have about $600,000 left to kind of use at the city council's discretion. And so some of the future anticipated expenditures that staff anticipates either bringing back here shortly, as is the case with this first one, or including in next year's budget. So we do anticipate needing about $25,000 more for the audiovisual equipment in the council chambers. And we'll be bringing that to a future city council meeting to get the supplemental budget request approved. The second item, police department project contingency funds of 10% or $200,000. Again, we may not need those, but we want to kind of set those aside just in case we do end up needing those. And then the police department officer base pay / revenue recovery for next fiscal year. So that again will help with the recurring general fund deficit in the amount of $300,000. Now these projects listed on the screen are not necessarily set in stone, so the council can play with the number, any of these projects or the amounts that you want to see used for ARPA funds. So if we did include the last slide, which is about $525,000, that leaves $87,614 left. And so staff kind of has been brainstorming, and we've come up with five different projects that we think would be beneficial. And so that is employee hazard pay stipend. We estimate that cost would be roughly, that could be anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. Economic recovery and beautification efforts on Main Street. Again, the estimated amounts could vary, but we estimated that cost at $100,000. We could put some funds down towards Riverwalk and downtown and revitalizing those areas and trying to enhance the economic benefit that the city receives from those areas. We could put some more funds up through the chamber with their retail recruitment strategy that they have currently going. And then the last project is upgrading City Hall HVAC system. And so you can see if we did all these projects, it would be more than that $87,600 amount, but we wanted to kind of throw them all up to the council and see if there were any particular items on this list or any other items that the council has heard from the public that you would like to see staff move forward with or prioritize ahead of any of the others. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Merritt if he wants to add to the projects listed here, or if there are any other questions.
Yeah, and I would just add for the council that these are ideas. We haven't developed them. We haven't really gone through and come up with a detailed budget estimate, just to kind of give a little more detail on some of these. Some other local agencies are paying their employees. So our city employees, they all reported to work during COVID and were deemed essential workers. So one thing that our other cities are doing is providing some back pay for those employees who had to come to work during COVID and really didn't see any kind of change to their work schedule or reporting. And then I'd say the economic development, the retail recruitment through the chamber. The chamber has a multi-year contract, and the intention of that project and effort is to have ongoing retail recruitment effort. The chamber is paid for the first year, and then the second year is an additional $40,000. So if we wanted to continue that effort, have the consultants continue to work on trying to attract additional retail to the city, then that would be the avenue by which we'd pursue that. We've also considered with the Riverwalk or downtown revitalization, can we find a way to really do some, cohesive strategy for the downtown Riverwalk? It could even be for Fortuna Boulevard. And we do have some proposals from a consultant that include a lot of different options. But if this is something the council would want to see, we'd want to go into this in a lot more detail. Staff also, we really like the idea. I don't have a great sense of the need right now, but economic recovery and beautification on Main Street, we're thinking about facade improvements, maybe pressure washing, maybe signs, but the council could come up with a grant program to try to encourage some of the businesses on Main Street or Fortuna Boulevard to improve the looks and aesthetics from the street. So that's our idea. We haven't developed it. We haven't had a lot of feedback from businesses. And then the upgrade City Hall HVAC system, that's one of the things early on in the pandemic that we had thought about it. I talked to our general services superintendent today. We have a combination of multiple systems. It's really an old system without good filtration. And so it would be a preemptive effort to improve the HVAC system. Likely would have a cost of more than $40,000, it'd probably be at least 50. But it would be an opportunity with these one-time funds to update an HVAC system that's pretty old and piecemeal together.
Thank you, Merritt and Aaron. Does anyone from the council have comments or questions?
I think they all have merit, no pun intended, but they're all valid, and they would improve the community and the conditions at City Hall and work environment. So I think they're good.
What are you looking for, Merritt? Are you looking for direction? Are you looking for, you're just tossing out some ideas and we're going to discuss it in a future meeting? What do you?
Well, I think in particular, if you could look at the list that Aaron provided on the second to last slide and kind of give an indication as to your agreement for the spending of those funds. Those are ones that staff would like to proceed and bring back to the council to incorporate in the budget. And then of the last slide, if we could just pick out or prioritize which ones the council likes, but you know, it really, it's an opportunity for the public to weigh in too. So I think it's important to hear what the public has to say. There's a lot of guidance on the use of these funds that encourages the public participation in transparency for the use of these funds. So our main goal is to really to bring it to the public with some different ideas and hear what the public has to say to really be consistent with the intention and the rollout of these funds. And if the council wanted to look at that last slide or add other ideas or kind of look at these and give us an indication of which ones you like or don't like. I heard Councilmember Johnson say he likes them all, but if there's any that you're gravitating to, we could develop them further and bring those back to either amend into the budget or bring them back as a part of the normal budget process. So again, Aaron, if you want to go to the second to last slide and show the ones that we're kind of counting on, I think we would just go from there. And then, you know, importantly, to hear from the public.
So when you say hear from the public, are you talking the public is hearing this meeting, or are you talking we're going to put more information out there somehow to
This
get their
meeting-
attention, or?
This meeting is a public meeting.
Okay, but no one weighs in.
I mean,
Okay.
that's a reality we're in, but there's an opportunity to just because, you know, I don't know if we're gonna have any comments or not, but you know, this is a standalone discussion item where we're discussing the use of the entirety of the funds where, you know, the public does have an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay, Jeremy and Mike Losi both have their hands up. I don't know who was first. Go ahead, one of you. Jeremy, looks like you're unmuted first.
Yeah, I feel like before I could really offer a suggestion for priority, I'm wondering, like, first things first, we got to get this PD facility finalized, and then we know whether or not we spent our contingency or not, so we know how many of these other projects we can fund. Secondly, I don't know if there's going to be a revenue loss or recovery needed on years 22 and 23. So again, I don't know how much of that budget that we have quote unquote earmarked that we would have to work with for some of these other projects. And then going to the last slide, of course, I'm super interested in economic development, and I'm assuming that it's through the chamber because the chamber implemented the original study, but I'm sure curious to know how that study turns into a quality return on investment towards economic growth before I want to re-up for that extra 40 grand. Yeah,
and certainly we'll have the chamber come back with some of the products of their effort. And again, these are further out. They're not things that we'd initiate, but really just the concepts now. And if, you know, the council likes them, we could develop them and bring them back with a more detailed presentation for each one of them, or the ones that the council thinks would be beneficial for the community and they want to see staff can
and
continue to develop.
We have this, we have this great workshop that I'll go into during my report regarding FBID, but is this retail recruitment through the chamber because the chamber initiated the initial study? Or would this be something that this is what we want an FBID board to pursue? Or am I blurring the lines right now?
You know, the reason that we listed it with the chamber is because they contracted with the consultant Retail Strategies to really come up with a comprehensive effort to identify vacant space, to really do some work on defining the community and the types of businesses that could be successful here, and then to conduct outreach to different types of retail companies that may want to locate here. So really, because I'm assuming it would be an amendment to the contract with the chamber to continue the work. That's why the chamber's listed there. And, you know, as you stated, a lot of the goals of that project fall within the mission or the municipal code purposes of FBID. So yes, there's a lot of overlap, and, you know, I think that effort could be with either organization, but because the chamber contracted, it's the reason we listed the chamber there.
Okay, thanks.
Mike Losi, you were next. Mike Losi, where are you?
He's muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the second to the last, the future anticipated expenditures, I think the additional funds for audio-visual equipment should go forward right away, understanding that that'll have to come back to council for a supplemental budget request. And also understanding that's going to be a total of $45,000 toward audio-visual, but I think we need to address that as soon as possible. Of course, considering the public health officer's announcement today with regard to the Eel River Valley issues, that might be a little bit further down the road, but I think we want to do in-chamber meetings or move to in-chamber or hybrid meetings as soon as possible. So I think that that's a priority. The contingency, I see that like what Jeremy said, that we're not going to know about that probably until sometime next year, the year after that. So that just, I suppose, kind of sits there in the event that we need to have that contingency. The other is the police officer base salary. I'd like to see that happen. But again, we'll be discussing, that year's budget. But I would like to see that also as a priority. With the economic, on the bottom page or on the last page, with the economic development, I absolutely agree with Jeremy that we need to take a look at funding the retail strategies through the chamber, but for a second year, but I would like to find out a little bit more about what their successes have been and a little bit more about that program. And maybe we can set something up with Renee and somebody from retail strategies and find out more about that program. But I would say that that would be a priority with those considerations for the remaining funds. Thank you.
Mike Johnson.
Okay, having to decide which one is my favorite child, so to speak. The contingency for the PD facility is needed. Having done some of these remodel or repurpose or even just repair existing buildings, you invariably run into something that is going to cause a thing to go over that's unforeseen. It just never fails. May not take the entire contingency, but it will exceed the funds budgeted generally. So I think we should have that there. Don't need to change the page, but on the second page, the economic recovery, that is a good thing to do, and that helps to develop downtown and business district areas. So that's a positive thing. And those are the two that I would pick out.
Thank you, Mike. Tammy?
Okay, first of all, you have $330,000 worth of projects and $87,000. So I wouldn't want to choose to go above that, because I'm guessing we would have to come up with that money from someplace else unless we, didn't use from another project. But I don't want to authorize a project until we know for sure that we have that money. So I wouldn't want to authorize anything over $87,000. So I don't know if we can look at, that amount and what would go into that. And then if there's more left, then go into other projects and look at other projects. But I wouldn't want to take the time to put a lot of time into what these other projects are if we're not going to be able to fund them.
Am I the only one that likes upgrading City Hall HVAC system. I think that that is really important, and it's really hard to find money to do improvements at City Hall. And I think if anything, this pandemic is showing us is like if we filter our air and have good circulation, I think that would be important. Mike, I mean, you
I'm for that as well, but one I didn't give much weight to that I want to kind of touch on again is a grant or a low interest loan or whatever that looks like for the beautification of downtown. I feel like it's a lot like, I always give the example of how I've been a customer of Verizon for 13 years, and they give all these incentives for people to come on board, but they never give incentives to people to stay with them, right? So I want to support economic development and new growth, but I also want to support businesses that have been here forever. So that one's also important to me.
So
I
maybe getting
agree, Sue.
there, or are we just talking around in circles because we don't know how much money we're going to have when?
It's a discussion item, and I guess what my suggestion would be is, Aaron, if you can go back one slide, is it was good to hear the discussion and the thoughts regarding the projects on the last page, but I'd recommend just including the line item that we have for PD facility project contingency in the additional $87,000 that's unallocated as just, I'd put it in reserve, and that's eligible. We can define the use later. And I guess I just wanted to point out too to the council that when, we use these funds to pay for police officer base pay, those funds are really going to the general fund, or they're offsetting an expense that the general fund would have. So, those funds aren't just, we're not paying those on top. They're, again, a substitution for general funds that are going there anyway. So my recommendation, I think I've heard what I need to from the council, and I would like to develop some of the project ideas a little bit more that are on the last sheet. And I think what we'd be inclined to do then for our project list is just keep the remainder in reserve, in addition to identifying the police facility contingency in reserve for now, and list all of the remaining projects that we know we want to proceed with. And I would just say that I agree with Council Member Losi that the audiovisual equipment in the city council chambers is really important. We're going to have to operate on a Zoom platform, and I think there may be times it'll be desirable to, even after COVID passes. And so we're working on the updated estimate for that now, but it's a much needed improvement anyway. So we'll have higher resolution cameras and a number of other things that'll make our meetings more accessible and higher quality. So we will proceed with that one. So I guess that would be the direction that I'm taking from council at this point. And to Councilmember Stanfield's comment, it's interesting when you bring somebody into the city and then you drive down Main Street. Some businesses do a really good job of keeping up their facades, and a lot of them really get let down because they don't look as good as when you really stop and take a look. I think our downtown could use some help. So I'm personally pretty excited about that one. I like the rationale that Councilmember Stanfield put forward about trying to help the businesses that are here to keep up that appearance. And so that's one I think we'd like to pursue as well. But I think for now, put it in reserve, maybe develop our ideas a little bit more, and then bring that back to council, while we still have enough time to designate those funds. And of course, I do think that HVAC is important, but I think hearing how the council's thinking about that is what we need from this discussion.
Okay. Mike Losi, do you have anything different to add? I need to get going here.
Yes, I would just like to thank Aaron for putting that together. It's very succinct and professional, so I really appreciate that.
All right.
And I need a retraction. I should have said Verizon. I apologize, Verizon. I should have just said my cell phone carrier, but I didn't mean to out anybody, so sorry.
Oh, you already did it on public TV. All right, city manager's report.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I'll review the updated meeting schedule and then just a few notes of interest. But the next our next regular council meeting is on November 15th at 6:00 p.m. Our next planning commission meeting is on November 9th at 6:00 p.m. And our next Measure E committee meeting currently is December 21st, although we may schedule a special meeting to discuss the topic brought up this evening. And the next Roner Community Recreation and Park District meeting is on November 3rd at 2:30 p.m. And I just wanted to recognize a few things that happened over the weekend that a lot of effort went into. And first of all, I'd like to thank Renee Lindsay, Chamber of Commerce, for really organizing the U.S. Capitol Christmas tree whistle stop. It kind of popped up, and Renee really grabbed a hold of that and made that an event. And I've talked to a few folks who have gone, and they had a nice time, and it was pretty interesting and nice to see the Christmas tree as well as the displays that went along with it. And there's a number of city staff that helped with that, from park staff, general services, the police did the escort. So a lot of folks put effort into that, and it was nice that Fortuna and the surrounding area had a chance to check it out. And then the Roner Park Spookathon, I know some council members may report on this, but I was really pleased that our recreation supervisor, working with our parks director, took it upon themselves to come up with some new events. And it was a very well attended event. And I think I'll leave it for our mayor pro tem. I know she reported back to me on that one, but it was well attended, maybe a little too well attended, but it really showed that there's the desire or the interest in an event around Halloween that people want to get out and see each other. So I think we'll look forward to how we can do that better in the future. And I'm pleased that our Parks Department took that on. And then a lot of staff time right now. There's a fast-paced project and a proposed development at the former Palco Mill site. So it's taken a lot of staff time, and we're doing our best to be responsive to that project and really try to meet the applicants' timelines. And then I had a discussion with Ian Hoffman, and I also sent the council a memo. There was a press release today, but there's some concern on the part of county public health about increased incidences of COVID, and actually the positive test rates in the greater Eel River Valley area being higher than the rest of the county. And so they put out a press release, and just wanted to point out that we are seeing the trend going in the wrong direction in Eel River Valley. So I just wanted to bring that up, and the press release is easy to find on the county website or the usual media sources. And then daylight savings time is coming up this weekend. Everybody should remember to change their clocks on Saturday night. And also November 11th is Veterans Day, and city facilities will be closed. So if you're looking to do business, get it done before, and we are open again on Friday. So that's the Thursday. And then just generally, it's a very favorable climate right now for employees, but not employers. And so we have a lot of recruitments out that we're having a difficult time filling, and we're really doing our best to stay competitive. And so we'll bring more to council on that. We'll bring more to council about that in the future. And we're doing our best to be aggressive and do what we can to attract employees in a lot of different ways. So that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Merritt. Future agenda items. Do we have enough on our plate without adding anything else, or does somebody have something they feel strongly about? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to council reports. Mike Johnson.
Thank you. This past last week, I received an email that following the Redwood Empire Division meeting for the League of California Cities, I was reappointed to the Transportation, Communication, and Public Works Policy Committee Policy Committee, and looking forward to another year with that. And maybe we'll actually get to have some in-person meetings, don't know, but we will continue doing our work on that committee. Also, for those transit users watching this late, there is an opportunity to weigh in with the HCOG as they meet the unmet transit needs for Humboldt County. If you go to hcaog.net, you can find an online tool to submit comments for unmet transit needs. There is a deadline of December 31st, 21 to submit your comments. But if you have a concern or a comment you want to leave, you can do that there. Also, we had our HCOG meeting last week, and we, following in that meeting, we re-upped the new findings for AB 361 and took that for continuing the Zoom meetings. On the consent calendar, one of the items was the overall work program and budget amendment. They actually had some rollover funds for that, so we were able to utilize those. In the action items was new bylaws and a code of conduct for the SS TAC that Cameron brought up, the Social Services Technical Advisory Committee, setting some ground rules for that, as well as something that was really, I liked, was an online as well as an app for the bike map and bike and trails map for Humboldt County. And was remarkable watching it in action. And Stevie Luther, who was here earlier with the unmet transit needs, was one of the ones that worked on that and developed it, and it's a great tool. And we also finalized and put out for public review the regional transportation plan update, and the public comment period, I believe, either is open now or open soon for that. And you can view that as well on hcog.net. And we also, one of the things that our executive director has done is develop a strategic plan for the freeway call boxes, the SAFE system, Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies. And we are repurposing some of those, moving the ones that aren't used very often or not at all into areas that need it. And some of the cell phones will become satellite phones, so that areas where there is no coverage for anything, there will be able to make an emergency call. And that's all I have to report at this time.
Thank you, Mike. Mike Losi.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll go really quickly here. I had one meeting with the Redwood Coast Energy Authority on October 28th under the Community Choice business. I'm now part of an ad hoc committee to provide input with staff on negotiating for energy service with Nordic Aqua Farms for their non-standard or their commercial rates. It's really interesting. The amount of energy that Nordic Aqua Farms is going to use is huge. It's more energy than Eureka, Arcata, or Fortuna uses. So it's going to be the largest commercial account that RCEA will have. But that's going to be, something that will happen years down the road. The negotiations they want to start probably within the next year or thereabouts, so they have an idea of what their costs are going to be down the road. Also, the board authorized staff to continue to participate in the negotiations for procuring long-duration energy storage from a company that's called LS Power and their Tumbleweed project. The goal is to bring the board agreement to approve energy storage services with that company. Under old business, the board approved a revised power structure agreement for the purchase of solar power with the Hatchery Road solar program. It's RPCA Solar. And then there was some discussion about Trinity County as well as Delaware County wanting to join into RCEA joint powers agreement. And there was discussion, and there will be some additional discussion, just not much interest on the part of the board at this particular point. And we had a closed session about performance evaluation of the executive director, and we'll have additional meetings about that. So that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Jeremy.
Thank you. I'll start out with Parks and Rec, and Cameron Mull wanted to give a little report on the activities that have gone on recently and some of the stuff that his department's working on.
Thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate that. I'll be brief. I just wanted to reiterate on Merritt's comments. Merritt, thank you for bringing up the Roller Park Spookathon. That was yesterday on Halloween. It was our first annual event. It went very successfully. We had more attendees than we had anticipated. We estimated about 500 children participated in the event, with about 2,000 to 2,500 people in total in the park. So it was a very positive event, and we'll just make it better and better every year. I did want to take an opportunity really quickly to thank our sponsors. Due to the fact that our recreation department supplies budget is very slim, we did rely on a lot of local businesses to help us pull off the event. So I wanted to give them some recognition. That's Redwood Riverwalk Hotel, Fortuna Ace Hardware, Pepper's Restaurant, Bella Italia Restaurant, Fortuna Kiwanis, the McLean Foundation, the Fortuna Grocery Outlet, Body Works, Sandy Peterson Photography, Fortuna Laundroland, Jenny's Car Wash, Cornerstone Realty, Quintal Realty, Greens Pharmacy, Westside Pizza, Double D Steakhouse, and Six Rivers Management. Thank you so much for all of you for making that event happen. A few other things. We're starting a drop-in volleyball program that will start this coming Sunday. It'll be Sundays, 5:30 to 7:30. It's only a $3 drop-in. We'll also be starting a drop-in basketball program soon. I'll submit more details as we get closer to that. We also are anticipating starting our Hot Shots program, which starts in January, but registration will begin a week from today. That's Monday, November 8th. So sign your kiddos up for Hot Shots this winter. And then finally, we have our Thanksgiving break camp coming up, which is Monday through Wednesday during the week of Thanksgiving, and that the registration is open. So feel free to call the office and get your kiddos signed up for that. Thanks for a little bit of screen time, Jeremy. I appreciate that, and I'll let you continue. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That spookathon, my goodness, it was like it was rodeo weekend down there. It was such a great turnout. I'm super impressed with your the people that coordinated that event, and you can see how much people desperately want to, connect with their community and be involved in something that's fun and exciting to be a part of. So thanks for bringing more of those type of recreation opportunities to the city of Fortuna and their citizens.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate that. I want to give credit to Emily Apodaca, our new recreation supervisor. She did most of the grunt work to help pull that off. So kudos to her. And yeah, it was nice seeing the kids out there really having a good time and enjoying themselves. I think it's been a couple years since any of them have been able to participate in some kind of carnival, Halloween carnival activity. So very positive. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I wanted to continue my report with FBID. The president, Emily Hobelman, and the board and I would all like to extend a thank you to the city council and staff, Merritt and Aaron specifically, for the workshop that we had. It felt very positive. It felt very productive. It felt like there was some new energy and how to make FBID better than it's ever been moving forward. And the president said she'd like to thank you, look forward to the coming together on the ordinances, the bylaws, the contract revisions over the next 60 days. And happy to include Merritt in any hiring committee that's being part of. Spoke to another council member about maybe having an ad hoc that included a council member or two, Merritt, and then some members of the FBID board as the hiring committee. So we'll iron that out as we move forward. We have a meeting coming up again on November 9th. So we'll discuss more and fine tune our plans with FBID more. And then I wanted to give a quick update. Some of our board members have taken the reins and run with it. So the Owl Gray Lighted Parade will be happening on December 10th. So that's an exciting thing to come back to Fortuna. That's been a couple of years away. In conjunction with that, we'll have the Downtown Open House with the Downtown Merchants Association also participating in that as it stands right now. One of our other board members has contacted American Express and got us all signed up for the Shop Small program through the American Express. And then just wanted to give a big thank you and a big shout out and a big attaboy to all the different businesses that participated in the trunk or treat downtown. It was a great turnout, lots of kids, lots of fun things to see, lots of participants for other people than just Main Street businesses. So it was really neat to see the community come together and support things that we haven't been able to do in the past. So, and then, yeah, I just want to reiterate the spectacular job of the group that put together the Sugar Bear Whistle Stop and the local businesses that supported that. To come to Fortuna was such a big deal. And I just thought it was really neat that we were able to be a part of that special, once in a lifetime for most of us, opportunity. So yeah, thanks to all the community members, all the businesses that have been stepping up in a big way to make Fortuna have events that are real special. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeremy. Tammy?
Thank you, Mayor. My first one is I did get reappointed to the Cal Cities, the League of California Cal Cities Redwood Empire Division to the Public Safety Committee again. So I'm very happy to be on that committee again. I did attend the Capitol Christmas Tree event. That was very nice. There was a lot of people down there. And I got to meet Blitz down there. You can definitely tell he's a puppy. He likes to jump and greet everybody. That was his first day back from training, and he was very excited to be there. And he's a nice dog. We've got 2 really nice canines now, which I'm happy about. And I did send Merritt a text when I drove down the park, and there's no place to park. They were parked clear down on Main Street, everywhere, people everywhere. So it was a huge event. It was a great success. So that was really nice to see. Let's see. Oh, and then I also wanted to say, if you want to get details about city council meetings, we are now being covered by the Enterprise. It's got new owners, and it's now Fortuna and Ferndale newspaper, and they will have city council reports in it every week. So I think that was all of my report.
Thank you, Tammy. Several of us are involved in the League of California Cities committees, and Tammy did not mention that she is the first vice president of the Redwood Empire Division, so she will be the president of that organization next year. So thank you, Tammy, for stepping up and continuing to serve us and represent. I am seeking the presidential appointment to the Housing, Community, and Economic Development Committee. Again, I was honored to receive that last year, and I think I have a good chance of getting that position again. The council's been busy. We did have 2 important workshops, planning workshop, which is, projecting projects and zoning and all of the things to keep our city moving forward. And then we had our FBID workshop, which was very well attended, and I think pretty successful, because that's just an important part of our city economic development, that we can just really enhance that organization. And I think going forward, we can make it better, and we can really benefit from that. So I was excited about that. I wanted to thank Sienna and her crew for the Halloween party that the city held. It was awesome. As always, Sienna is party planner elite, and I just appreciate you going out of your way to get the employees involved and included and keep the morale boosted. You do a great job. And just a quick clarification, Merritt, on that Measure E thing. When we were trying to get those passed, I knocked on a lot of doors and made a lot of promises. And so that is my main goal, is that, I promised the citizens that we were going to have that oversight committee. And so I just want to make sure that that is really transparent and that we don't exclude them from making decisions. And so that's why I just felt so strongly about that, is because I made that promise to the community. So just a little clarification on that. And then real quick, a special thank you for the PD patrol officers that were on patrol last night. We had a little 4-year-old friend who was so excited about Halloween, and he called every day and said 4 more days, 3 more days. And he kept, he was all excited, and then he got COVID and he couldn't go trick-or-treating. So we called a bunch of our friends, got them to do like a little drive-by Halloween. And I checked with Matt Everhart, and he got the patrol officers to stop by because the little guy was dressed as a police officer. His dad is CHP, and he just wants to be a policeman. So they totally made his night. And that's just one more cool thing about our community, going the extra mile. So with that, I am going to ask the council if they mind continuing our 2 closed session items until November 15th. I am late to an appointment that I have, and I just wonder if anyone minds if we continue those to the next meeting.
Yeah, hurt us.
What?
Hurt us. It's 8:30.
Well, and it's just getting late, and anyway.
It is.
Anyone have any?
Can we get that in a motion, please? I'm sorry.
Yes, that's what I was going to ask. If no one has any questions, if someone would make a motion to continue both of those items to November 15th.
I make a
Also moved.
motion, we continue the closed items to November 15th council meeting.
Second.
All right, thank you guys for understanding and doing that. We have a motion and a second. Siona, do you want to roll call?
Yep, Councilmember Johnson,
Yes.
Councilmember Losi,
Yes.
Councilmember Stanfield,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Trent,
Yes.
Mayor Long.
Yes, thank you guys. I appreciate it. So now we just need a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks you guys. See you next time. Gotta go.
Bye.